Hey, it's Dave Wyman from Danny, Dave, and More. A little football 101 for the offseason here. I want to look at a play that ended up being a 98-yard interception return by Bobby Wagner. And Bobby Wagner just gets an A+ this year. He just best linebacker in the league. So here's the situation I want to look at. I was looking at this play the other day. I thought it was interesting. 3rd and 3 on the 5-yard line with 4:45 or so, fourth quarter. It's 37-16 in the game. And the 49ers drove all the way down to the 5-yard line. And what the Seahawks ran, now I always qualify this by saying, this looks like quarters to me. Cover 4, and what that is you've got 4 guys deep and 3 guys under, but it also kind of looks like cover 2. But the way that the corners sort of drop off, it kind of looks like they're playing quarters, which is usually like a prevent defense type, because, you know, the more guys you have deep, the more, you know, you're trying to protect something over the top. And then, you know, obviously you can hit lots of passes. That's why you see in, you know, 2-minute drills where they can just dink and dunk all the way down the field, because the underneath coverage isn't important. The deep coverage is important. But this is an interesting variation to run down on the 5-yard line, just because you can't run man all the time. But if you run zone, these throws, you know, if the goal line's right here, that throw is going to come in there really fast. Whereas usually in a zone, you drop back 12, 15 yards, you know, and you can react to those or keep everything in front of you. But if you're on the 5-yard line, you got to jump stuff. So if you do play zone, then you've got to play a really tight zone. It's almost like a matchup zone. So this is what it looked like to me. And what you do in cover 4 is, it's really important for these underneath guys right here to crowd, okay? So, and the rules, you know, typically for linebackers are that you're going to cover the 3 inside guys. You're going to push to them. In other words, you're going to drop to a zone, but you're going to crowd them, get really close and tight to them. And so, for, you know, this linebacker they're in nickel, so this is Bradley McDougald, he's going to push to number 2. You count from the outside in. This is number 1, this is number 2, that's number 3. And so typically what you have, this linebacker push to number 2, this guy pushes to 3, and he pushes to 2. So you're trying to get underneath and take care of the underneath guys. Well, what they do is they bring this running back here, and he comes inside and lines up here. So now, you know, this is the new number 2 here. This is the new number 1. It's not that complicated. I taught it to high school kids. Number 1, number 2, and then he becomes number 3, and that becomes the guy that Bobby's going to crowd. Reason why I thought it was cover 4 is just because these guys did drop out, but they both turned inside. So, because what they're doing is they're kind of working with the safety on these 2 guys, where if a guy goes like that and that, you know, you're going to sit there and make sure he doesn't get past you, and then hopefully you get this guy underneath this guy. And this is another thing. This becomes the new number 2, right? So you're crowding this guy. He goes out, and all of a sudden this guy comes in. That's the new number 2. So as for KJ, he would kind of start to go with that guy and then see that it's crossing and then go out and crowd the other guy. So that's the principle of zone. Bobby Wagner, what he does here, because what happens is this running back ends up bleeding up in here and then kind of turns out. One of the things I thought was interesting about Bobby, and he did this a lot in college. When I watched him at Utah State, he would sit in his stance and the ball would snap and he would just kind of stand there for just like a second. And, you know, I don't know if that was just like a habit he got into in college, but in this pass play, that's exactly what he did. He stood still for almost like 2 seconds. I think that the quarterback, he's looking at movement and he's checking things off in his mind. I don't know that he might not have lost Bobby and not kind of lost track of him, because he did not move. He just sat there. But then what he did was he jumped this really hard. Now, the quarterback, who was Nick Mullins, who was like their 3rd-string quarterback, he did throw it way to the outside, thinking that he was going to get it away from Bobby. But Bobby just jumped it, and he's got excellent hands, and he just reached out and grabbed it, probably almost fully extended, and then took off 98 yards for a touchdown. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm giving the linebackers an A+. Mostly 65% of the time, it's KJ and Bobby out on the field because they go nickel so much. The most common formation in the NFL offensively is 1 tight end, 1 running back, and 3 wide receivers. So you got to bring in, for matchup purposes, you've got to bring in an extra defensive back. So usually you're just having 2 linebackers on the field, And so Barkevius Mingo, who I thought did a really good job for a guy who hadn't played as a stand-up linebacker this year, and he did a great job on special teams. So hopefully all these guys will be back, and the reason why I'm saying that is KJ Wright doesn't have a contract right now, and really an important player. But you know, I kind of want what's best for KJ. I want him to be happy. I want him to get lots of money, but I also don't want him to leave. So, and I'm not sure how much the Seahawks are going to pay him to stay. But KJ Wright, hopefully these guys will all be back together, and you know, I think this year you can give the linebackers an A+.